just pure luck that you get this special event, okay? Our goal is to have lively discussion, interaction, and questions between journalism students from UC Berkeley and a former colleague, and she's come back to give back and talk to you.
I'm here to talk to you, and I brought some folks from the Berkeley J School who are journalists who have been working in the field and going to school. Deanna, how does it make you feel to do journalism?
I see people who are from where I'm from or who have experiences like me of being born in another country and then growing up here and then seeing what gets on the news and just knowing that it's not the whole truth. And then me being able to go out there and talk to those folks and be able to get those stories out there. I feel a satisfaction. That's what I like about it.
So I'm going to start out by just throwing a couple of concepts out and asking you to just do a word association. How about you? I'm going to throw out a word to you, magazine. What comes to your mind?
In Touch.
In Touch? That's your favorite magazine?
No, it just came to my head.
Okay. What about the value of magazines? Do you think they're
$2.99?
$2.99. See, there you go. Very literal. Right now, there's a lot of, home foreclosures, just a lot of jobs disappearing. How do you think your neighborhood might change because of that?
More families gonna be in debt, which makes them hard to survive. And then the ones that can't survive is gonna force them to rob people and stuff like that, and the crime rate is gonna rise.
Go back up.
Does it ever make you angry when things go on in the neighborhood?
There's some things that go on that just displease you. Like, you see all these fights and poverty all around. Like, you always see like drugs around you and Latinos fighting against other Latinos and black people fighting against other Latinos. Sometimes you just wish that would change, and that Oscar Grant thing that just happened just made Oakland look even worse with that.
An unarmed man shot in the back by a BART police officer. Did that get, how many people here followed that story?
It was on the news, in our schools, papers, internet, YouTube. It was everywhere. Like, we all was affected by it.
What did people think about the fact that you could see the shooting on video? Did you think it was a good thing or a bad thing that you could see that footage?
Good and bad, because police always think they can get away with something. And now it's on camera, and you can't say, oh, I didn't shoot him, but it's right there on camera.
Thank you.
Wasn't one side of the story. It was one person's word against the other. It's right there. It's right in front of your face. It's like you decide you decide whether it's good or bad based on what you see, not what you hear.
So I've been reading a lot about how people are concerned that people are making these judgments based on what they saw, but you still can't see the whole story. And it just reminds me of, once again, the power of the media, because you can show people these images and they assume that you're showing them everything that's there, but who knows, if the camera were over there, maybe you could have saw, or if the microphone were much closer, what you could have heard. And so I think, and I'm wondering what you all think about that.
I think it's what you make of it. You can think whatever you think. It's not the full fact. You don't know the full fact. I don't think anybody really does, except for the people who were next to Oscar Grant or in front of him and stuff.
That night, I had two of my friends there of the shooting. So it was like their experience.
They were actually there on the platform?
Actually there. It was just a whole bunch of commotion that just happened that night. But
how old was your friend, or is your friend?
She's 16.
Well, how did she feel about it?
She don't like talking about it a lot, but she'll tell you she was there.
For Diana, how does journalism in Mexico differ from journalism here in the United States?
Let's just say there's a lot more freedom of the press here, granted, that's not always the case, and I think here it's more media is controlled by the companies that then decide what media they want to put out there. And in Mexico, the media is very controlled by the government, just historically. We come from, it was like 70 years of the same party that was in power in Mexico, you know, so they always control the news that got out. It's been more, I think they say like after Iraq and some other country, Mexico is the most dangerous place in the world for journalists. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we're right next to the U.S., you know, like it's not a coincidence. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in Mexico that's very connected to the U.S., and it's not convenient a lot of times to get that truth out and to do that really hard investigative journalism about, you know, who's benefiting from all this drug getting traded, like who's benefiting from all these people getting crossed across the border along with the drugs, right? And I think there are really serious journalists, but it's a lot harder to get good journalism done in Mexico.
Here at Fremont, there's 4 schools on the campus. And one of the schools is actually being in the middle of being phased out, how they say. And so it's going to be closed down gradually over the next 4 years.
Which school is it?
Paul Robeson,
And what's it specialize in?
performing arts.
When you ask people why they're shutting it down, what do they say?
People don't even really want to comment on, like, they gave me a report from downtown about, like, why they're closing it down, like, test scores and, it's test scores and budget problems, but, like, people haven't really said a legitimate reason why they're closing it down. It's just, so.
So how did you go about deciding who you would talk to and what kind of information you would get to cover a story on your own campus?
Basically, I just go and talk to the principal and then the counselors and then get student reactions on how they feel about it.
So what's the format? Magazine, newspaper, TV, radio?
Newspaper.
Do you ever feel a special pressure when you're writing this stuff because you know that everyone is going to see it and it's about your school?
Yeah, like when you do stories about the school, it's always like, what are people going to say, how they're going to react? And so, like, you kind of try to think of that stuff in advance, think about what they're going to say in advance, or think about how they're going to react to the story in advance, so then when it happens, it's not such a surprise. And then, I mean, you always worry about how people outside the school going to react too, but then it's like, you gotta write the story, so.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Ronald.
I think like what you're doing is so telling of like what we call, you know, like what's the role, quote unquote, of the media, right? Is it to just kind of like sensationalize and do this whole like these are celebrities and that aspect, or is it to really like put forward the hard issues that affect our communities, you know? And I think like the fact that you as a youth in this community and as a student in the school doing a story like that is almost like a challenge to the system in a way, right? It's almost like, yo, we're watching y'all, you know, like we're wondering how come you're closing down our schools and how come it's affecting us. And I think that's like what you guys are doing is so powerful in that sense, because it's not just that you're telling the stories, is that you as members of the community and as like conscious youth who are really thinking about why is this happening, that kind of like makes them a little uncomfortable, right? They're gonna be like, okay, fine, here's this paper, here's this information, and they're not gonna want to give it to you because they're like, why is this kid asking me this? But at the same time, it's so important as a process of like, if this is supposedly a democracy that we're living in, it's our role to do that, you know, like it's our role to question that and to ask like, how come they're not closing down the schools in the hills because they got higher test scores? How come they got higher test scores? You know, like, and that's really that's dope. That's props. That's cool.